So today I'm going to talk about the Medical Training Prioritisation Bill. Ever since this has been announced, I've had lots of questions. There's been lots of things flying around in different forums, on Reddit and so on. So I wanted to make a video explaining this in detail and looking at some of the frequently asked questions. So we're going to look at which jobs are affected, who will be prioritised, what are the different groups. We'll look at the differences between 2026 and 2027. We'll look at the timeline and how things go from being a bill to becoming an act, and then I'll go through the frequently asked questions. If after watching all of this you've still got questions, feel free to post in the comment and I will answer there, and if there's lots of questions I might post a follow-up video. My name is Muhibur Rahman. I'm a Portfolio GP and the Medical Director of eMedica. Let's get into it. Which jobs are affected by the MTP bill? It talks about prioritisation for UK foundation programme, so the 2-year foundation programme, the 1-year FY2 standalone programme, specialty training at ST1 and CT1 level, and then higher specialty training, which is at ST3 and ST4 level. So all of these are affected by the Medical Training Prioritisation Bill. What it does not apply to are non-training jobs. So who will be prioritised? We're going to look at this separately because the way things will be prioritised are different for foundation and for specialty training. So we'll look at them separately. So let's look first of all at foundation and FY2 standalone. For this, it's the same. There's 3 groups that will be prioritised: UK medical graduates, Republic of Ireland medical graduates, and then those that had a primary medical qualification from 4 countries where the UK already had a prior treaty: Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Sweden. There's no prioritisation for foundation and FY2 standalone based on immigration status alone. Now, for the 2-year foundation programme, prioritisation is likely to have a big impact. Why? Pretty much every UK medical graduate applies to foundation, but you also have some of these other priority groups that will be applying alongside people outside of priority, international medical graduates from other countries. These 3 groups will be prioritised, and it's only if there's any jobs left unfilled that they will be offered outside of that. For FY2 standalone, it's likely to have less of an impact, and that's because hardly any UK graduates apply to FY2 standalone because they will have gone through the 2-year foundation programme, which makes them ineligible for FY2 standalone. So who will be prioritised for specialty training? Well, the first 3 groups are exactly the same as foundation, i.e. UK graduates, Republic of Ireland, and these 4 countries listed here. In addition to that, if you're applying for ST1 or CT1 level training, if you've already completed or are currently in UK Foundation Programme, the 2-year programme, or FY2 standalone, you will be prioritised. And then if you're applying for higher specialty training, ST3, ST4 level, then if you're currently in or have already completed a related core training programme in the UK, you'll be prioritised. What does it mean related? Related to that higher specialty training. For example, if you're applying for ENT, if you're currently in core surgical training, you'll be prioritised. And then doctors with certain immigration status that are outlined within subsection 2 of the bill will also be prioritised this year. So what are the immigration statuses mentioned in subsection 2? There are 5. So if you're a British citizen, a Commonwealth citizen with a right of abode in the UK, if you're an Irish citizen, if you've got indefinite leave to remain, ILR already, or if you're an EU citizen with settled status. An EU citizen without settled status will not get any priority unless they are within one of the other groups already mentioned. So what are the differences between this year and what's proposed for 2027? 2026, it will only be applied at offer stage, i.e. if someone didn't get shortlisted and didn't get offered an interview for IMT, they're not now going to retrospectively give out people interview slots because of the priority groups. It's only going to be applied at the offer stage. In 2027, it's going to apply at both interview and offer stage. So the priority groups are going to get interview slots, and only if there's any left over, they'll be offered to those outside the priority groups, and then again at offer stage. The other big difference is that in 2027, doctors within subsection 2 of the immigration status that are being prioritised this year won't automatically be prioritised, i.e. doctors in these groups, they won't automatically be prioritised in 2027. Instead, doctors with significant NHS experience will be added to the priority group. However, the definition of this and the details have not been clarified and also will be discretionary, i.e. there'll be flexibility to change that from 1 year to the next. And even the details that will apply for next year, those are to be confirmed. Now, what's the process for a bill to become an act of parliament and actually become law? These are the stages. So first of all, a bill can either be introduced in the House of Commons or it can be introduced in the House of Lords. In this case, it was introduced in the House of Commons by Wes Streeting, the Secretary of State for Health. So the first reading has already happened. That's when it's actually presented for the first time in Parliament. The second reading is going to happen later on in January, and that's when there's a debate and people can ask questions and get clarification, and the whole bill will be debated. It will then go to committee stage. Because it's an emergency law, there's normally a report stage after that. That's going to be skipped, and then there'll be a third reading. Now, for a lot of laws, there can be big gaps between the second reading, the committee stage, and the third reading. But all of these are going to happen on the same date, on the 26th of January, because it's an emergency law. If it passes all of those, it will then go to the House of Lords, and they could propose changes at this stage. If it passes through there, then the final stage is that any things that were brought up at any of these stages, there'll be consideration of any amendments before it gets passed for royal assent. That's when it then becomes an act of parliament and it becomes law. So what's the timeline for that? So the first reading already happened. It was introduced to the House of Parliament on the 13th of January. The second reading, committee stage, and third reading are all tabled for the 26th of January. It will then go through the same process in the House of Lords throughout February, and the deadline for it all to be completed and to be sent for royal assent is the 5th of March. If it can't be done by that time, it will be too late for it to be implemented in time for the round one offers for 2026. Now, it's likely to pass. That's because all parties are broadly supportive of this principle. So, what are some of the frequently asked questions that I've already received or that I've seen posted in various groups? Let's go through them. The first is, will this apply for the current round? The answer to that is yes, if the bill passes all the stages and becomes an act. As I mentioned, the deadline for that is the 5th of March. But as all parties are broadly supportive, it's very likely that it will be passed. However, amendments may be suggested and may be made as part of the process. Remember, the second reading, committee stage, third reading, that's happening later on in January. It'll go to the House of Lords in February, and then we need royal assent by the 5th of March for it to be enacted in time for this round. Next question is, which specialties are affected? Well, Foundation and FY2 standalone, they're affected as programs, but all specialties are ST1 and CT1 apart from public health. The reason for that is medical training prioritisation, and public health is open to non-doctors as well as doctors. And so there's some legalities and complexities around that such that it can't apply to public health. For higher specialty training, all specialties are ST3, ST4 level. Remember, it does not apply to non-training posts, locally employed doctor posts, clinical fellow jobs, things like that. So how will priority work in 2026? Essentially, all those in the priority groups that are appointable will be ranked separately. Now, what does someone need to achieve to be appointable? I'll give you a couple of different examples. For specialties like GP and psychiatry, it means you pass the MSRA and get at least band 2 in each paper. If you get band 1 in either paper, you're considered to have failed the exam and you're not appointable. So then even if you're in the priority group, you will not get an offer. For specialties that have interviews as well, let me give an example of core surgical training. The MSRA will be used to determine if you get one of the limited slots for interview. So you still need a great score in the MSRA to get that slot for interview. After interview, they're going to look at how you did that interview, your portfolio, all of that will be looked at, right? And then you're going to get a rank based on that. Some people, their score will be so low at interview, they will be considered below the threshold to be appointable. Then they can't get an offer. So only those that are appointable will be ranked, but they'll be ranked separately. Anybody that is appointable and is ranked, whether they get an offer or not will determine how high their rank is, and when they get to their place in the ranking, are there any jobs left? So someone that's below the threshold for appointment won't get any offers. But then of those that are appointable, they'll all be ranked separately to those outside the priority groups. Now, which priority group you're in doesn't matter. They're all considered the same. So if you're either in any of the priority groups, so for example, UK graduates won't be given preference to Republic of Ireland graduates. They won't be given preference to international graduates who've been through foundation, for example, for core training. All considered the same. As long as you're in a priority group, you're all going to be ranked if you're above the threshold for appointability. If there's any jobs left over, then everyone in the non-priority groups, they're going to be ranked separately, and based on rank order, they could get those jobs that are unfilled by those in the priority groups. Okay, which brings me on to a really important question that I've been asked. Should I continue preparing? The answer to that is absolutely yes. Whether you're in a priority group or not in a priority group, you should continue preparing. Why? You've already done a lot of the hard work at this stage. Filling in the application, getting your portfolio ready, preparing for the MSRA, preparing for interview if you're doing IMT, for example. So remember that getting an interview for those specialties that use MSRA to shortlist is competitive. Getting an offer remains competitive. And just because you got to sit the exam or just because you got to interview, even if you're in the priority group, it doesn't guarantee you a job. If you're below the threshold for being appointable, you won't get any offer. So you still want to absolutely give it your best, because the higher you score, the more chance, number one, you get an interview if MSRA is being used to shortlist, or for example, things like IMT where there's no MSRA. If you've already been given an interview, the better you score at interview, the higher your rank, the more likely that, number one, you get an offer, number two, it's an offer in an area that you want, but that you've got to at least be above the threshold for being appointable. It's still going to be competitive. Okay? Look, within the priority groups, if you look at the data from the Department of Health, Health Education England and so on, they're predicting that within the priority group, competition ratio overall will drop to just under 2-1. For individual specialties, it could be much higher, it could be much lower, but let's say at 2-1. You see, that still means half of people aren't getting an offer. You still need to work hard to be competitive. Then what if you're not in a priority group? Well, there will be fewer jobs available. In some specialties, there may be none left after they've been given to those in the priority group, especially specialties where there's very few jobs, there may be none left. However, if there are some left, the better your scores, the more your chance that you're going to get an offer. The better your score at MSRA for things like GP, psychiatry, the more likely that you get an offer, because that's the entirety of your rank. For specialties that use MSRA to determine if you get an interview slot, there's no priority this year at the interview stage, so you could still get an interview slot if you do well. And then the better you score, if there are any jobs unfilled, you want to be at the top of the non-priority group so that you get one of those offers. Okay, so absolutely keep preparing. And then this is from NHS England website. If you look at this, what they've done is they looked at the data from 2025 and they looked at appointable UK graduate applicants for various specialties. And I'll give you an example. I'm a GP. I look at the GP data in a lot of detail each year. So for GP, there were about 4,500 appointable UK graduates, i.e. they got a passing score in the MSRA. There were 4,300 jobs. If you look at that as a competition ratio where we just to look at UK graduates, it's just over 1:1. However, do you know how many UK graduates accepted a post in GP last year? It was 2,000 something. Okay, i.e. about half of those that were appointable didn't take up a post. Why? Because a lot of those will also got an offer for another specialty. GP might have been their backup. Remember, if you accept one offer, you can't accept anything else. All your other specialty applications get withdrawn. But also, some people might have got a good score, got an offer, but it might not have been the area they wanted. And so they didn't take it because they can't move. They've got kids in school. Their partner might be in a job that's not so mobile. And so they chose not to, and they're applying again and hope to get a better score so that they can get the area they want, and so on. So 2,000 plus jobs last year went to people who weren't UK graduates. Now remember that within the priority groups, it's not just UK graduates. This is just the data that they've got. Remember that there are lots of international graduates that are in priority groups because, for example, they're in FY2 standalone or they're in foundation. You could have someone who isn't a UK graduate but is a Republic of Ireland graduate, or they're a British citizen, or they have ILR. All of them are in the priority groups. So it's likely that for things like GP, there will still be some jobs left over after those in the priority groups are appointed. However, there might be, it might be in the hundreds rather than in the thousands of jobs that are left over. There might be 15,000 plus people in the non-priority group competing for it. It's going to be much, much more competitive. So work on getting the absolute best score that you can. Okay. And I'll pop the link where this is from because it also deals with some other frequently asked questions on the NHS England website. I'll pop the link in the comments. What does significant NHS experience mean? So remember that the groups being prioritised this year based on immigration status will not automatically be prioritised next year. Instead, it will be those with significant NHS experience that will replace that part. The other groups, UK graduates, Republic of Ireland, those will stay the same. The details of this will be confirmed prior to 2027 round 1, and the bill proposes retaining flexibility to change this if required. So for example, 1 year to the next, if they see that, look, there are some areas or some specialties where they're not filling all the jobs, then they might open it up and they might change who can apply. What will be the level of experience considered significant experience? They might change that 1 year to the next. Remember that the BMA had proposed 2 years NHS experience by a certain cutoff to be considered significant. Whether it will be that, whether it will be more, that could change 1 year to the next, and the details of that are just not available at this stage. They haven't been decided yet. They will be outlined nearer the time. So that's an overview of the Medical Training Prioritisation Bill. I hope you found that helpful. If you have got any questions, please pop them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. Ultimately, if you are going for it this year, give your absolute best shot. Prepare and you will succeed.